Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, there's a theory out there that we're all doing a cheap knockoff of Johnny Carson. That every single one of us is doing a cheap knockoff of Johnny Carson. That could be true. Good morning and good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to America at Night. McGraw Milhaven. Week number 2 on the show. So far, so good. We survived the first night. We survived the first week. Onward and upward. A little bit later on in the show, we have a guest who's written an article for Slate magazine. And believe it or not, they wrote a very compelling article about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And was there somebody else involved? It's a bit convoluted, but it's a pretty good whodunit. And so we'll have the time next hour to take a look at that article from Slate magazine. But this hour, we are going to talk about a talk show host that hasn't been on the air for 33 years and yet still dominates the conversation. And if I play this song for you right now, that's the cue, Richard. There you go. Iconic theme song written by Paul Anka. Of course, the theme song to The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, right? Just iconic. Well, there is a man who has hosted a podcast called the Carson Podcast, and he's written a brand new book published by Dutton. Came out last month. It's called Love Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend. Mark Malkoff, welcome to America at Night.
McGraw, thanks for having me.
You betcha. You know, I'm kind of jealous that you get to spend your days just immersed in Johnny Carson.
I know more about Johnny Carson than my wife of 20 years. I don't say that proudly, but I can't believe I talked to over 400 people. I mean, everybody wanted to talk to me. Sitting down with Mel Brooks telling me about going on Johnny's first show on October 1st, 1962, and all the backstage stories. But time and time again, McGraw, they would tell me, I love Johnny Carson, which is hence the title, Love Johnny Carson.
So he hasn't been on the air in 33 years. It's amazing he still dominates today. But why are you so enamored with him, and why is the audience still so enamored? Right? They don't care about anything 33 years ago. But you mentioned Johnny Carson, and everybody, even the young kids, perk up today.
Yeah, all the late night hosts still mention Carson. A couple of weeks ago, Jimmy Kimmel had the Rainbow Curtains as an homage to Johnny, and he recently asked Paul Anka about writing the theme for Johnny. I started watching when I was, 5 or 6 years old. My dad on Friday nights would let me stay up late and got me into classic comedy. Like, it's a mad, 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 mad world. So I knew who all these people were. Like, in kindergarten, kids are talking about Mighty Mouse. I'm talking about Johnny Carson and Buddy Hackett and Don Rickles. So there was just something likable about Carson. He could be amazing with the A-list movie star, but then he'd be with kids. He'd be with animals, and then people that weren't even famous. And it was like this giant party, and I had all these questions about what went on behind the scenes.
And so you set out to just interview people who knew Johnny Carson. That was the goal of this show or book.
It was originally the guest, but it never occurred to me that I could sit down with a guy that held the curtain open for Johnny for 20 years and see what that was like to be backstage with him. I mean, some people like David Letterman need complete silence backstage before the show, but Carson would be telling jokes, smoking one of his Pall Malls, and just so cool hand Johnny, the gentleman said. And just as Ed would say, here's Johnny. Johnny would just be telling a joke or just hanging out. And he was just so cool as a host. And I think that he's still the gold standard. It's amazing on YouTube, billions of views of Johnny Carson, and the fact that we're still talking about him today and he makes headlines.
Well, and the YouTube videos still stand the test of time. Let's dive in and let's talk about some of the misconceptions and/or things that we think we know about Johnny Carson. So it was rumored that he was a bit standoffish and he was a little tough to deal with off stage. True or false?
Well, I mean, the stereotype from the media, they made him out to be cold and aloof. I was the first one that really talked to his friends and the people that spent a lot of time with him. And they told me it was a small group of people that Johnny trusted, that he felt comfortable with. But these people consistently said the same thing, which was Johnny was almost the same person on and off camera, a little less gregarious, but he had to really know you, sometimes for a couple years. And that's consistently what they told me. Now, for self-preservation purposes, he was shy. He was not always outgoing like Johnny Carson. I mean, he was on that list. Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, had a short list of people to kill. Johnny was on that list. Routinely, the FBI had to step in and protect Carson. So he had to protect himself. And also, he was doing an hour and 45 minutes the first couple years in New York, and then 90 minutes. He was just exhausted. He would pace himself like an athlete on game day. So sometimes people would see cold and aloof, but that was just protecting the energy and self-preservation.
What was his relationship with Ed McMahon?
They were good friends in the beginning. Johnny was hosting a game show called Who Do You Trust on ABC, and Ed was the announcer, and they would go drinking the Sardi's, and then Johnny brought Ed over. Ed actually begged for Johnny to take him over, got on his hands and knees at Danny Hideaway, tears coming down his face, and Johnny said, "Fine, I'll take you." Johnny had a drinking problem. He talked about it on The Tonight Show. He said that some people would get fun-loving when they drink. Johnny said, "I go the opposite. I want to fight everyone. I turn into Attila the Hun. It's that one extra drink." Ed McMahon would go out with Johnny and just kind of get him home and protect him just from himself. And then they got to Los Angeles and they got to L.A. in about May of 72. And they started drifting apart a little bit, still get together on anniversaries and birthdays. But they did go apart until Johnny had a son that passed away tragically in 1991. And then McMahon had a son that passed away, I think, in 97. That brought them back a little bit. But their on-camera chemistry was like nothing else.
The man we're talking to is Mark Malkoff. He's written a book called Love, Johnny Carson. It's published by Dutton, just out. So let's talk about Joan Rivers, because... Yes. I looked up for this show. I looked up his all-time guest lists or guests, and Joan Rivers was on there, one of the top. I mean, she was on all the time.
Sure.
Was the falling out because she went to another network and tried to go up against him?
That had nothing to do with it. I sat down with Barry Diller here in New York face to face, which I tried to do with all my people, and Barry Diller told me that he told Joan, "You have an obligation to tell Johnny that you're going to be opposite him on Fox." Barry Diller was in a poker game with Johnny. It was Neil Simon, Steve Martin, Carl Reiner. It was a really fun thing. So Barry Diller's friends with Carson. And Joan's own friend said, "You need to tell Johnny. He's going to feel betrayed. He's going to be furious." Joan had signed a deal 2.5 months prior to her press conference announcing that her show. And she was still in negotiations with Johnny Carson Productions to keep guest hosting The Tonight Show, even though she had signed a deal and had no intentions of doing the show. So Johnny found out from NBC president Brandon Tartikoff that Joan had a show opposite. And Johnny was really, really hurt, really upset. One person close to Carson said he was in tears. And then Joan tried to take Johnny's producer, Peter LaSalle. Joan admits this. Peter told me that this happened as well. And then Joan tried to take every talent coordinator, all 5 of Johnny's talent coordinators away from him, offered double their salary, but out of loyalty. And that was Carson's biggest attribute, loyalty. They all stayed with him. And Johnny just couldn't understand how this woman, who he made the permanent guest host for 3 years, who became so powerful and rich. I mean, she broke Frank Sinatra's record for casinos for residency. That this is the way that she would treat him, and he was heartbroken and famously never talked to her again.
Wow, Mark Malkoff. That's some juicy gossip. The book is called Love, Johnny Carson. We're just getting started. Mark, hold on. We got more to get to and more nuggets of information. This book is getting rave reviews. Love, Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend. Love, Johnny Carson. Back in a moment. Hey, let me tell you about these statements and products that have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition. What am I talking about? Holiday parties, family dinners, and everything else. It's like I'm going to overindulge this holiday season again. Heavy meals, the occasional second drink or two. My liver is going to be working overtime. Maybe Johnny Carson could have used Active Liver from New Nordic. If you're feeling low energy or bloated, these could be signs of your liver needing some love. Help give it what it needs with Active Liver from New Nordic, a simple way to give your liver this daily shot of extra support so you can actually enjoy the holiday. Made with turmeric, milk thistle, and global artichoke extract. Natural ingredients shown in some studies for supporting healthy liver and helping your body clear out the toxins from alcohol and rich foods. Active Liver can help your liver give it the relief it needs so you can keep the holidays rolling. You can find New Nordic's Active Liver online at Amazon, VitaCost.com, iHerb.com, and in stores at CVS, Meijer Grocery, and ShopRite.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Now let's dispel this myth once and for all.
What?
About the drinking and all the jokes and so forth. You know, everybody's made the jokes for years. I've been guilty of making the jokes, and it's, you don't drink that much, do you?
What do you mean?
It's a prop more than anything. You come on.
This ain't no prop.
Oh, come on. I know. Juice. You put juice in there, and everybody says, look at Dean, he's up there, and how can he do a show and drink that way? I've seen you in the MGM, and you sit there and all during you sip this, and it's, I'll tell you.
There you go. If you love Johnny Carson, you'll love the book, Love Johnny Carson. Mark Malkoff is our guest. Did Dean Martin have orange juice in there, or was it real alcohol?
I heard back and forth, but I think when he was on Carson, I think that was real. In Vegas, it might have been orange juice. But Dean Martin would cause anarchy on the set. They would take these, they were based in New York in the 60s, and they'd go to Hollywood, and Dean Martin would show up in a tuxedo with a drink and just take over the show. He was one of the best walk-on guests to him, John Wayne. That's one of the reasons, McGraw, that they moved in 1972 with the bigger guest, because you couldn't get Bob Hope or Jack Benny or Lucille Ball to New York. It was very rare. So that was one of the reasons they went out there, Dean Martin, people like that.
Let's go back to the beginning. The guy comes from Norfolk, Nebraska, and I don't want to call him a country bumpkin, but he's got a warmth to him, obviously. He has that Midwestern likability. But I know enough to know that there had to have been somebody somewhere in his corner that said, that's the guy to replace Jack Parr, or that's the guy who should fill in for Jack Parr. So who was his champion before he was Johnny Carson?
His champion was 100% wife number two, was Joanne Carson. They were dating at the time. They were not married. Joanne Carson was running The Tonight Show. Peter LaSalle, Johnny's producer, told me Johnny had no idea the power that she was doing behind the scenes. She contacted NBC, two people, Dave Tebbutt and Mort Warner, and she said, please come to the Friars Club Roast for Gary Moore. Johnny's performing, and offer him The Tonight Show if you think he's talented. And they loved him. They offered Johnny The Tonight Show, and he turned it down. He said, nobody can replace Jack Parr. Everybody told him to turn it down. His wife is the one that said, Johnny, you need to do this. We're going to do this as a team. And famously, he took over for Jack Parr. And in the beginning, people were calling Carson boring because Parr would cry on the air and have all this controversy. And Johnny said, no, we're going to do an entertainment show. Now, people back in New York, they don't remember this, but Johnny, even the first week, he went to Yankee Stadium, and they have video of him pitching to Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. He would skydive. He would play at the Polo Grounds with the Jets. He was really, really active. The New York years were great, but that was Johnny the first 10 years. And the wife, number two, is the one that got Fred DeCordova, Johnny's longtime producer. She was pulling the strings.
Interesting. Okay, so again, back to this list of top 10 number of appearances. Not surprising, John Hope. Not surprising, Don Rickles. But Charles Nelson Riley, you'd win some serious money if you picked Charles Nelson Riley as one of the top 5 guests on The Tonight Show. How did that happen? What was that all about?
I think that they're probably counting him going on with guest host. He went on with guest host a lot because Johnny wouldn't always be hosting the show. Sometimes it would be someone like really a good host, someone that could do it like McLean Stevenson or Don Rickles. Other times it would be Arnold Palmer or people like Kirk Douglas, people you would not think would be guest hosting. The Cass Elliot, you never knew who was going to guest host. Kermit the Frog. But Charles Nelson Riley was one of the rare guests that he wanted to be the last guest on. He thought the audience was better, and he was better because most people want to be on early for the prestige. But he tried to guest host one time, and he couldn't do it. It was a big flop. Doing that job looks easy, and Johnny would watch some of these people attempting to guest host his show, and some of them just fell on their face. I mean, Lauren Green from Bonanza trying to do a monologue and trying to interview people. I mean, the skill set Carson had was like nobody else.
So today, they just do repeats. They don't really have fill-in hosts. So why did Carson have fill-in hosts and nobody else has fill-in hosts?
Yeah, Kimmel does these days just in the summer for a little bit, but Johnny needed to protect his energy. In the beginning, he was doing an hour and 45 minutes. NBC was having him on the weekends do affiliate dinners, and he was just exhausted. And just for pacing himself, they would have the guest host here and there, Joey Bishop, whoever was around. And then Johnny started playing Vegas in 1964, and he turned the offer down. It was so much money, and his wife is the one. Same wife was like, "No, we're going to do this. We're going to do this as a team." And that is when he started taking off a month for the summer to play Vegas at the Sahara. Broke Judy Garland's record in 1964 and never looked back.
Interesting. The book is called Love, Johnny Carson, One Obsessive Fan's Journey to Find the Genius Behind the Legend. Mark Malkoff, real quick, you've done a series of Carson podcasts. Plug your new podcast, because it's all about late night, and I guess late night current events and Jimmy Kimmel and Letterman and everybody else. Is that what this new podcast is all about?
I have a podcast called Inside Late Night, which is part of LateNighter.com. Talk to people from Saturday Night Live, Letterman, writers, producers, talent, past and present. And I am starting to do new Carson podcast episodes. The podcast ended 4 months ago, but I have unearthed all these people. Speaking of Nebraska, one of Johnny's old buddies who he was friends with for decades, who got him started at WOW in Omaha. I found this gentleman's daughter, and she was telling me all about hanging out with Johnny, and her and her dad, Merrill Workhoven, were friends for decades, and his car broke down going to visit Johnny, and Johnny surprised him with a new car. Those are the stories that I've been told.
Where can we find the podcast?
CarsonPodcast.com, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard.
Mark Malkoff, Love, Johnny Carson. Back in a moment with more America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
I've been studying UFOs. Did you know there are UFOs out here flying around, unidentified objects?
This would be the place for him, Southern California.
I'm serious. They're sighted.
Johnny Carson with Muhammad Ali. The book is called Love, Johnny Carson. Great Christmas gift, by the way. Our guest, Mark Malkoff, has a podcast where all fine podcasts are sold. The book is called Love, Johnny Carson, One Obsessive Fan's Journey to Find the Genius Behind the Legend. Mark, we often hear about the comedians that he called over to the desk, right? And that was the sign that he approved, and their career was then made after that. Who did he not?
I mean, some people like Jerry Seinfeld, it took about 5 appearances to get called over, but certain people like Stephen Wright or Drew Carey or Rodney Dangerfield, when they got called over, oh my goodness, their careers exploded. Now, previously in 1969, Johnny Carson and Dangerfield were feuding privately, and because Dangerfield accused Carson of ripping off one of his jokes, Carson's writer, and used all these words I can't say on the radio right now, and they wouldn't put him on. And then Dangerfield apologized and it was like, I was in the wrong. And then Johnny booked him but said, I'm not going to call you over no matter what. And Dangerfield just blew the roof off the place. That Johnny's like, I have to call this guy over, and history was made.
So Johnny knew the power of calling the guy over to the desk.
He did. And at the same time, he was just really nurturing to the comedians. George Lopez, I talked to him. He gave me a blurb for the book. And Lopez and many other young comedians said Johnny, after the show and even during commercials, would punch up their material and like, can I give you a joke suggestion? Lopez said he followed Johnny's advice the next night and got huge laughs.
Interesting. Who did he never call over that ended up becoming big or sort of defied the gravity and still made it?
Definitely Ray Romano is probably the biggest. He got knighted by Dave Letterman a couple of years later. There were certain people that just kind of went on the show and you never heard from them again. It really depended. But some people like Dave Letterman, obviously, I mean, 4 appearances, he's guest hosting the show as an unknown. It had never happened before. And then in 1983, Albert Brooks was set to guest host for the first time and had to go to the hospital with a kidney stone, and they gave it to an unknown Gary Shandling to guest host. He finds out that he's going to have his dream come true and guest host The Tonight Show, and he starts crying in his office with Brad Gray. He can't believe it. Shandling was one of Johnny's favorites. They actually wanted to give the permanent guest host to Shandling, but he turned it down, so they had to reluctantly give it to Leno.
Interesting. What about Dana Carvey? He's often said that Johnny just didn't like him for some reason.
Johnny loved Dana Carvey in the beginning. In fact, when Johnny would pick out the anniversary show clips, they showed Dana Carvey. Everything was good until Dana started doing Johnny on Saturday Night Live. In the beginning, the sketches were innocent, and they started getting a little bit mean-spirited. And Johnny thought it made him look senile and out of touch and did not want to become what he thought Bob Hope was, that he stuck around way too long. And Johnny would be told on a Thursday, they're going to do a sketch about you. We don't know if it's going to make it yet to air. And Johnny would just say, we make fun of people on this show so they can do whatever they want. I just don't find them funny, and I don't get it. And Dana Carvey was banned from the show.
What about Rich Little? Did he have a problem with Rich Little?
He didn't have a personal problem with Rich. That was Johnny's producer, Peter LaSalle, who basically thought Rich Little was doing the same impression every appearance. And on artistic merit, Peter LaSalle, the producer, wouldn't even come into work when Rich Little was guest hosting The Tonight Show. I mean, he guest hosted over 50 times, and he just thought it just got old. And Johnny would defer to Peter LaSalle and the producers. Johnny would say, I'm not good with picking the guests, and that was something he was really good with delegating.
Let's talk a couple more here because there's so many iconic. Don Rickles. I mean,
sure.
Don Rickles was, iconic. And no matter what show Don Rickles went on, it would have made him a star. And so, was Johnny the genius or was Don Rickles the genius?
I think they both just played off each other's genius. In 1965, Don Rickles debuted on Carson's show. Up until then, no late-night show was brave enough to put him on. It was considered just unthinkable that somebody would come on and make fun of the host. Johnny, for 3 minutes, told the audience, okay, this next comedian is going to come out. He's going to make fun of me, but it's going to be okay, and just really hammered that in front of the audience. And it was decided Rickles could come out, make fun of Ed and band leader Skitch Henderson. Then the audience would see Johnny laughing, and eventually it would be okay for Rickles to make fun of Johnny. But it really took the bravery of Johnny Carson.
What about the story? Do we still have you there, Mark?
Yeah, I'm
Mark,
here.
Okay, good. Mark, what's the story, the famous clip where he breaks the cigarette dish and he leaves the set and he goes to CPO Sharkey? Was that a bit? Was that real? Was that fabricated? Tell us about that bit.
Don Rickles had no idea that this was going to happen. The night before, Bob Newhart was guest hosting, and Rickles was just joking around and banging Johnny's cigarette box up and down and broke it. And Johnny did know that this happened. He was actually watching at home. And then the next day, Johnny, kind of pretended that he discovered that his cigarette box was broken. And Doc said, oh, Rickles did that the night before. And Rickles was taping his sitcom, CPO Sharkey, across the hall and had no idea that Carson was going to ambush him during the show. It had never happened in late-night TV history. So Johnny, beforehand, got his assistant, Bobby Quinn. He said, I want to have enough cable for this camera to go across the hall, a microphone with enough slack. And it was the one time that we've seen Rickles speechless. I mean, Johnny just hammered him. It was beautiful, beautiful television.
old school Johnny, black and white. He's got an axe thrower, and he's teaching Johnny how to throw an axe, and they got a fake body up there in an outline. And the guy throws the axe, and it hits the fake outline right in the crotch. Naturally funny, or was that staged?
That was not staged. I was actually in Beverly Hills with Ed Ames, who threw the tomahawk, and he told me all about it. And I talked to people that were there. Ed Ames was on a show called Daniel Boone, and it opened up with him throwing a tomahawk, but it was all trick photography. They taught him right before the show how to throw a tomahawk, and they were going to take turns, him and Johnny throwing. The first one, it hits the crotch area of the wooden cutout. Ed Ames told his wife that night, the funniest thing happened, but it will never air. The NBC censors are never going to have this air. And Johnny really fought for it, and it became an annual tradition on the late night anniversary shows that they would show this clip. It's still to this day considered the longest sustained laugh in television history because Johnny in his brilliance holds Ed Ames back. Ed is going to go retrieve this tomahawk. Johnny holds him, goes into Jack Benny mode of silence, builds up and then ad-libs, and the place just goes bananas.
Stan Can, who brought on his vacuum cleaners 77 times. How do you make a bit out of a vacuum cleaner 77 times?
I believe he would bring on inventions. Johnny really liked quirky people that would come on and either have inventions or demonstrations. Like Johnny would have somebody that was like Minnesota Fats and they'd play pool together. Somebody that just had a really unique skill set. The horseshoe champion would come on and they would do that. He would make people that were not famous. There was this woman in Indiana. Her name was Myrtle Young. She's in her mid-60s. She's a potato chip inspector at a potato chip factory. Notices the potato chips are in the shape of objects, and Johnny puts her on, and Johnny, in his brilliance, had Ed McMahon distract her during the chip demonstration and bit down on a chip. And this woman almost had a heart attack, thought Johnny was eating her chips, and Johnny reveals, no, I have this other bowl. And Myrtle Young would travel the world and all across the U.S. Johnny made her famous. There's another gentleman who would play music with his hands, the air, and compress it. And he went on the show 5 times, and he could play Stars and Stripes Forever with his hands. He was a practicing attorney in Michigan. He was able to quit his job and make more money playing Las Vegas because of his Johnny Carson appearances. Johnny would take somebody that was not famous, and suddenly they had careers, they had opportunities, and money was flowing.
All right, let's talk some more. We could do this all night long. The book is called Love Johnny Carson. Mark Malkoff is our guest. You can get the book at all fine bookstores. Dutton's the publisher. It just came out. It's a great Christmas gift. Love Johnny Carson. You talked about people he made famous, and one of them has got to be Bob Uecker, right? I mean, wasn't Bob Uecker was funny within baseball circles, but the wider audience didn't know Bob Uecker until Johnny Carson shined a light on him.
Bob Uecker and I spent an hour together, and he told me, it confirmed what I had heard, that Uecker, when he went on with Johnny in the late 60s in New York, was so funny that Johnny was convinced that this guy was never a Major League Baseball player. He was convinced he was a stand-up comedian, and all these stories were bogus about Major League Ball. And Johnny's dad had to show him baseball cards and newspaper articles because Uecker was so damn funny. He was one of the rare people where they would have a pre-interview, but they would never get to the questions. And Uecker would just go out and ad-lib, and he was as funny as any stand-up comedian.
What was the genius was about Johnny Carson, and you talk about the pre-interview, and oftentimes the comedian says, ask me about airplane food, and so the late night host says, so you flew in on an airplane? What was the peanuts like, right? With Johnny, when he was at his best, you could tell they were in uncharted territory, and it was just Johnny's curiosity was at his best, and he just listened to the guests tell a story.
Yeah, his number one rule was this: follow the curiosity, and also my number one rule is I'm going to make my guests look good. He didn't have to top the comedian. Some hosts have to get the laugh over the comedian guest and just try to just make themselves look good, and Johnny was able to step back and let the guest shine, and that was uniquely Johnny.
Yeah, let's talk about, just a couple minutes left, let's talk about the transition to Leno and Letterman. If Johnny was at his zenith and the most powerful person in Hollywood, how did it happen that he wanted Letterman to get it, Letterman doesn't get it, and Leno does?
Okay, so Johnny really wanted Dave Letterman to get it, but had no say whatsoever. Jay had a manager, Helen Kushnick, and they went to every NBC affiliate, politicking, making friends, shaking hands. Well, David Letterman is calling the NBC executive pinheads on his late night show. He's making fun of GE. Who do you think, McGraw, they're going to give the show to? I mean, Leno was just easy to control. He had guest hosted for Johnny something like 200 times. He knew how to do it. And I think it's just as simple as he was going to be a lot easier. It did break Johnny's heart a little bit. And you notice that the last time that man ever graced in front of a TV camera was when he did a cameo 2 years in his retirement when Dave Letterman was in Hollywood doing a week of shows and Johnny did a walk-on. He couldn't even get out of line because the standing ovation was so thunderous. He sits impromptu at Dave's desk, and then he walks off, and we never saw him again.
Yeah, and he never did anything with Leno.
No, he never did with Leno. He was fine with Jay. Jay's manager planted a fake story in 1991 that NBC wanted Johnny out, and Johnny knew it was Jay's manager, but Jay swore it wasn't her, and Leno eventually found out it was her and apologized to Johnny, and they were all good. But yeah, Dave and Johnny were pals. I mean, Johnny, at the last year of his life, was secretly writing jokes for Dave Letterman and faxing them in. And a lot of times when Dave would do one of Johnny's jokes, he would do a golf swing. It was an inside joke between Carson and Letterman.
Yeah, the day he died, right? Didn't Leno or Letterman come out and tell a whole bunch of jokes, and then at the end said, if these jokes sound dated, these are the last jokes Johnny sent me like 3 weeks ago?
McGraw, I was there. I was in the balcony. It was the most emotional thing. Peter LaSalle, Johnny's producer, was there. Doc Severinsen, Ed Shaughnessy, Tommy Newsom, and it was that Johnny did these. Dave Letterman did these jokes, and we're like, why? What? Like, it just didn't make sense because they weren't topical. And then he revealed, they were all written by Johnny, and
what were you doing? You just happened to be there?
I had a day job on Dave Letterman's CBS show for 11 months and 15 days, but who's counting, McGraw? So I had left the show, and Dave Letterman had a rule. If you had worked on the show, you were never allowed to be in the audience because it would throw him off if he saw somebody that he recognized or knew. Now, when Johnny passed away, I begged and begged some people, and they smuggled me up to the balcony. So I was in the very, very back of the balcony where Dave could not see me, and that's how I was there.
Wow. Mark Malkoff, the book is called Love, Johnny Carson, One Obsessive Fan's Journey to Find the Genius Behind the Legend. All right, I got about a minute and a half here. What was it? What was the one thing that you found out that you didn't know that you said, oh, my goodness, I got to put this in the book?
Johnny Carson was the most competitive person maybe in the history of TV. For 30 years, he dominated, but there was a reason. In 1971, he has 4 TVs going on in his UN Plaza apartment in New York. It's his show at 11:30, Dick Cavett show, David Frost, all opposite him. And it's either Joey Bishop or maybe Merv Griffin. So he's so competitive. He stops dyeing his hair because his girlfriend at that point, which became wife 3, said, stop dyeing your hair. His mom, Ruth, in Nebraska said, Johnny, you're looking so old. So what Johnny did is he faked hepatitis and went into the hospital and instead got cosmetic eye surgery. But hepatitis is contagious. So 200 people at NBC, Johnny's staff and guests like Tony Randall, had to get painful gamma globulin shots. The NBC nurse was administering shots to people that did not need them because Johnny had faked hepatitis. He didn't realize that this would happen. He just thought it would just be a ruse. But then everyone, all his staff were in lots of pain. But then there were NBC vice presidents that actually weren't around Carson that wanted the shot to show their proximity to the NBC's biggest star.
Love, Johnny Carson is the book. One Obsessive Fan's Journey to Find the Genius Behind the Legend. That's the book. One more time, Mark Malkoff, where can we find the podcast?
Yeah, the CarsonPodcast.com. We have almost 400 people. Carol Burnett, people like Robert Klein, the best of the best. It's TV history. Unfortunately, about 50 people have passed away since. People young like Bob Saget, Louis Anderson, but their stories are gold. It was important to record them, and they're all there.
Oh, my goodness. Mark Malkoff, Love, Johnny Carson. Love tonight. Thank you for coming in our first couple of shows. Mark, hopefully talk to you down the road. Thanks for coming in. Good luck with the book.
Thanks, McGraw. I like that a lot. Thank you so much.
You got it. The America at Night. I'm McGraw Milhaven. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we're back for a couple minutes for hour number one, talking about the book, Love, Johnny Carson. It is a fun read and a lot of great reviews. And if you like late night TV and love old school radio, even if you're even if you never watched Johnny Carson, he is such an iconic American and such a great storyteller. It is a great book. And I live by one of the sayings that Johnny Carson said. Somebody once went up to Johnny Carson and said, "Are you worried that the comedians you have on your show will be so funny people will say, 'Boy, he's funnier than Johnny Carson'?" And Johnny said, "Absolutely not. I would never, ever, ever think that." They go, "Why?" And he says, "Because the next morning around the water cooler, people will say, 'Did you see that comedian last night on Johnny Carson? He was funny.'" So Johnny was always great at sharing the wealth and sharing the spotlight, right? And if you put it out into the world, it comes back in droves. I thought that was a great story by Johnny Carson. All right, we're officially done for hour number one. Stick around. We're just getting started. Open phones in hour number 3. That's the goal. And then next hour, there's an article from Slate magazine about, is there possibly another somebody tied to the murder of Martin Luther King Jr.? We'll get into all of that next hour. Executive Director for America at Night is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Right to it. I was reading an article in Slate magazine the other day, and I couldn't put it down. It was the story that our next guest wrote about a man who is supposedly somehow involved in the Martin Luther King assassination. We know that James Earl Ray escaped from a Missouri penitentiary and on April 4th, 1968, shot and killed Martin Luther King Jr. He was ultimately convicted, recanted the story until the day he died, and then, minding my own business, Slate magazine pops up with this story. Nina Gilden Seavey joins us. Nina, welcome to America at Night.
Hey, McGraw. Thank you. It's really great to be here with you.
I was reading this story, and I wasn't believing any of it, and I said, who was this crackpot who wrote this story? And I was doing some research on you, and it turns out you're a real person with a real job and real credibility. You spent the last 30 years of your life at George Washington University, a fine institution. You started and were the founding director of the Documentary Center at the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. So you bring a lot of credibility to this story, and yet it is unbelievable reading this story.
Well, okay, so fair enough. And listen, I deal, with all of those, crazy crackpot conspiracy theorists that you're talking about. I mean, I have to sort of wade through those people all the time. But, like you say, I mean, I am a professor of both history and of media and public affairs. I've been working in this field. I'm an Emmy Award winning documentary filmmaker. I'm a podcaster. I'm an author. So I bring a certain amount of heft to the discussion. And this is a project I have been working on for, probably the last certainly the last 15 years. As I get older, it's almost going to be 20. So it's been sort of a passion of mine. It's only one project that I've been working on, but there is a lot about the King assassination that we do not know. And as it happens, as you, I guess, and I are both from St. Louis, I was working on a project, and unbeknownst to me, this issue of the connection between St. Louis and the assassination of King, and James Earl Ray, as you mentioned, was in the Missouri State Penitentiary. But there is a lot to this story that has been previously unknown, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so Russell Byers is the main subject of this story in Slate magazine.
Yes.
And let's start at the end. At the end of his life, in October, apparently, he calls you and says, I have a confession. And
not exactly.
Okay, so what take us at the end, and then we'll go back to the beginning.
Sounds great. So I have been, as I said, working on this project for a really long time. I have an 8-part podcast out there called My Fugitive. In episodes 7 and 8 of that series is sort of the first part of this story. So it's been something that I've written about. I've done a podcast about it. So it's really something that I've been following quite closely. The MLK the new records were just recently released by the FBI, and it was about 230,000 pages, which, to be quite frank, is not very much. But it's just the tip of the iceberg of what is still not yet been released. St. Louis Magazine did just a short article about my work and sort of my processing of these new documents, and what was I thinking about, and how was I approaching this new material, and was I learning anything more, which, to be quite frank, I really wasn't, because, as I said, it's 230,000 pages is not a lot for people like me. So I get an email from one of those crackpot crazy conspiracy theorists that you thought I was, saying the man who arranged for the assassination of King, who brokered it, is still alive, and I can connect you with him. Now, I get a lot of emails like this, so I was pretty tempted just to hit delete. And I thought, you know what? Russell Byers is somebody that I know a lot about. He testified in front of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. He was a well-known criminal in St. Louis. He was an art thief and an automobile thief, and he was considered one of the dirtiest, sort of worst criminals in the St. Louis area for many, many years. And I had always thought he was dead. In my work, I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to talk to this guy. But he says Russell Byers is alive. So I bit on it. And I said, so I wrote the guy back and I said, I don't know who you are, but I definitely am interested in talking to Russell Byers. And sure enough, Russell Byers was definitely not dead. He was living in a suburb of St. Louis, Creve Coeur, Rock Hill area. And he was 93 years old and ready to talk. And so I called him, and he and I had a very nice, long conversation, which he permitted me to record. And this was in August. I was going to go out with a camera crew and interview him, because you don't want to not, interview on film a 94-year-old man. And on his birthday, I was going to go out there on his 94th birthday, and he started negotiating with me, ever the criminal that he was. And he was like, I want $75,000. And I'm like, no, journalists do not negotiate prices with their subjects. I will do my best job to tell your story honestly, but I cannot do any business with you that involves the exchange of any money at all. So we had a disagreement over that, but I still had this interview that he had permitted me to record over the phone, in which he made a very important confession.
Okay. That's where we'll leave it. That's called a tease in the business.
Indeed.
Stay right there. It was a Slate magazine article written by Nina Gilden Seavey. She is our guest. Stay right there. We got a lot more to get to. Russell Byers and the story he tells on his deathbed to our guest about the murder and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Stay right there. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Back in a moment.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
This is an Emmy Award-winning 40-year veteran of nonfiction storytelling. She spent a career at George Washington University at the Documentary Center in the School of Media and Public Affairs. Nina Gilden Seavey is our guest. She wrote an article for Slate magazine that stopped me in my tracks. We're talking about a man named Russell Byers. And Nina, tell the story. He, I guess back in 1967 or so, was approached here in St. Louis. Somebody offered him money to kill Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yes. So as I said in last sort of segment of the show, is that, Russell Byers was a known quantity, sort of bad guy who could make things happen. He spent his entire life as a criminal and never spent one day behind bars. So he's a pretty savvy criminal, but a very active one. And in about 1966, 1967, he's really kind of vague about that. He was approached by a good buddy of his, John Kaufman, and he said, "Do you want to make $50,000? And Russell Byers said, "Sure," because at that time, $50,000 is about $500,000 today. He said, "What do I have to do?" So John Kaufman says, "At 6:30, we're going to go to a friend of mine's house in Imperial, Missouri." And so the two of them at 6:30 at night go over to this guy named John Sutherland's house. And Sutherland was a patent attorney in St. Louis, had an office downtown, and he very well-known attorney, but also very, very hard right, sort of supported, George Wallace, was a financier of the White Citizens Council, member of the John Birch Society, a sort of a pretty hard right guy. And he opens the door, and standing in the foyer of his home with a rebel cap on, sort of from the Civil War. And they walk into the house, and there's all kinds of antebellum paraphernalia around, all kinds of, Confederate flags, everything is all decked out. And so Russell Byers says, "Well, what do I have to do?" And Sutherland says, "Well, you have to assassinate Martin Luther King." Well, according to Byers, he didn't know who King was. I'm not so sure I believe that, but whatever. Most people did. So he said, but I think he was playing for time. Because one thing Russell Byers did not do is that he actually did not kill people. He didn't deal drugs and he didn't kill people because that was a good way to go to prison. But $500,000 back then, $50,000 was a lot of money. But he knew somebody who could do it. His brother-in-law was in the Missouri State Penitentiary for a hit job he had done. He ended up he was doing a life sentence, got out anyway, and was blown up in a car bomb. But he was a man named John Spica. And if he had wanted to broker the deal, he could have gotten it done. So he takes this offer and he's like, he comes outside and he says to Kaufman, "I don't want anything to do with this. It sounds like somebody's going to go to prison." So he goes away. And the next thing you know, King is killed and he gets nervous. So he goes to his attorney, a guy named Murray Randall, who then becomes a judge. And he says, "I'm worried about this. I got this offer." And Randall, who was an attorney at the time, says, "Don't worry about it. Just because somebody made an offer to you, it doesn't matter. You weren't involved. You didn't tell anybody." And this was after King had already been killed and James Earl Ray had been captured. Now, what your audience may not know is that he was Martin Luther King was killed on April 4th, 1968. James Earl Ray was on the lam for 2 solid months before they were able to catch him trying to board a plane in London. He was going to get to Brussels, and then he was going to make his way to Rhodesia, which did not have an extradition treaty with the United States. But he got caught by a very, very sort of savvy customs agent as he was trying to board that plane. So next thing you know, Russell Byers he's getting a little itchy about this. Murray, his attorney, says, don't worry about it. In 1973, Russell Byers tells an FBI informant about this bounty that had been offered to him by this guy who was sort of, represented these big business interests. And this guy goes to the FBI and reports back. He is an informant. That document about that was the informant report was put back into Russell Byers' folder and was not found again until 1978, when Russell Byers had committed yet another crime and was under federal investigation. And this informant report, which had not been passed on to Washington, had not been passed on to what's known as the Merkin file, which is the murder of King file, which was still very open at the time in 1973, 74, 75, 76, 77. And finally, they found this memo and they sent to what was now the House Committee on Assassinations. And Russell Byers found himself in the epicenter of what was this now wide open investigation as to the connection between Russell Byers, John Spica, the Grapevine Tavern, which is in St. Louis down on Arsenal Street, was in St. Louis down on Arsenal Street, owned by John Ray, and all of the St. Louis criminal conspiracy sort of epicenter that surrounded the Grapevine Tavern, that they began to believe was connected to the reason why James Earl Ray assassinated King.
The Grapevine Tavern on Arsenal.
The Grapevine Tavern on Arsenal Street.
What's the connection to James Earl Ray and the Grapevine Tavern on Arsenal in St. Louis?
Grapevine Tavern was sort of like I said, it was sort of the watering hole for the, kind of criminal conspiracy right-wing community that lived, that was really centered in South St. Louis at the time, owned by his brother, John Ray, and his sister, Carol Ray Pepper. So the Grapevine Tavern, sort of a kind of a hotbed of right-wing criminal activity, and so it was owned by the brother and sister of James Earl Ray. So you have all of these people who are now sort of circling, this sort of ultra right-wing criminal activity in St. Louis. But Russell Byers said, let me take a drink of water because I'm getting excited. I love talking about this. Russell Byers told the committee that he had not told anyone about the bounty until after King was dead. So if that was true,
yes.
If that was true, then nobody knew about it before King was assassinated. So maybe it was just, the whole thing was just circumstantial and, nobody knew anything. Because how would that information, if Russell Byers had never mentioned it, maybe they made the offer to somebody else, but it was only Russell Byers who had that in with the kind of the deep underworld, criminal right-wing underworld of St. Louis, connected to the Grapevine Tavern and to the Ray family.
Hold that thought.
Nina, hold that thought.
Get the drink of water. Nina Gilden Seavey. Russell Byers was offered, never told anybody. But wait, there's more. Stay right there. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven about who is this Russell Byers and how is he connected to the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination. Back in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Nina Gilden Seavey is our guest. She's an Emmy Award-winning documentarian, nonfiction storyteller. She has graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. She spent her career at George Washington University as the leader of the Documentary Center, and she wrote an article for Slate magazine talking about a man named Russell Byers who told the FBI he got an offer to kill Martin Luther King Jr., but after he turned it down, never told anybody. And then, Nina, you get a phone call on his deathbed. Before we get to that, it's important to note, if he doesn't tell anybody, right, then it's, okay, somebody made him an offer. Who knows if it's connected, right? It's too anecdotal. It's this James Earl Ray guy comes out of nowhere. There's no real connection. And then all of a sudden, now years later, you get a phone call. You go and visit this Russell Byers, and he tells you what?
So, like all good journalists, I lead him through the story, and I say, okay, tell me everything that happened. He tells me about the offer from Sutherland and all of the, Confederate paraphernalia. And then he says, and he made me the offer. And then I went, 5 minutes later, I went down to Maryland Avenue to an antique store with a guy I was doing business with, selling antique, fencing antique lamps, stealing antique lamps. And I told him everything. And I was like, no, you mean you told him 5 years later in 1973? And he said, no, I told him 5 minutes later. And like, okay, listen, I'm talking to a guy who's 94 years old, 93, 94 years old. I'm thinking, maybe he's got his timing mixed up. So I keep pushing him. And I'm like, if you told somebody 5 minutes after the bounty was made, you lied to the committee. And there's this long pause. And he said, I told him 5 minutes later, which is obviously, an exaggeration of some kind.
Right.
But immediately, and he said, so this guy was an FBI informant as well, because they were all, involved in this fencing operation, and they'd all been turned. And he said, he reported it to the FBI. The FBI did nothing. If the FBI had acted, Martin Luther King would not have been killed. And I was like, wait. I said, you didn't tell him. You told the committee that you didn't mention it to anyone, your attorney after King was killed, and not to another FBI informant until 1973. And he said, no. Do you understand what I'm telling you? And I said, yes, I do. He had lied to the committee to keep himself out of trouble. He had found himself right in the crosshairs of a major congressional investigation by Robert Blakey, who was one of the literally was probably the best known criminal prosecutors in the United States. He wrote the RICO statutes, and he is staring down Robert Blakey in the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and he lied.
But
he told somebody before King was killed, and that sets up an entirely new sort of, and I'm not going to say this is, now it's not a conspiracy theory. Now we are talking about the fact that somebody who was at the apex of the criminal, most of the criminal activity in St. Louis, Russell Byers had his hand in it. He had his hand fully in the right-wing kind of, advocacy criminal activity that was going on. And he was connected to the Grapevine Tavern. He was connected to John Spica. He was connected to John Ray and James Earl Ray's sister Carol.
Okay,
all
so
of it,
the concept here, the overviewing concept is that Russell Byers is offered $50,000 to kill Martin Luther King Jr. He turns it down.
Right.
He goes down the street and says, "Oh my goodness, I was just offered $50,000 to kill Martin Luther King Jr." This guy says, "Oh, wait a minute. So there's money to be made." Walks down or somehow gets connected to the Ray brothers and says, "Hey, I know a guy who was just offered $50,000." We don't know this, but it's sort of implied that word gets out on the street. Somebody follows the path to the guy. James Earl Ray takes him up on the offer, and there you go.
And listen, in the article in Slate, there's actually more connections than just maybe he said maybe. I mean, there actually was, and I don't want to go into the details because it's pretty granular, because that's what we do, because we're not doing conspiracy theories here. This was an actual conspiracy, because sometimes conspiracies do happen. Right. And the FBI was very, very good at its setting for creating these conspiracies that, these people operated very freely because they were giving the FBI very, very good information, and they did nothing.
Yeah, there were in the Slate article. There are a lot more connections, and you connect a lot more dots.
There's a lot
Obviously,
more. This even sounds kind of suspicious, but it's not.
Right, and we only have so much. We have so much time here, and that's why Slate magazine. That's why I couldn't put that article down. Now, a couple of other background things. James Earl Ray convicted and confessed.
Well, not convicted,
but then recanted. Did he not?
So he never was tried. So he didn't get convicted. He confessed. So he confessed to the crime, and 3 days later he recanted that confession, saying that he had been made a patsy for a guy named Raul or whatever. I mean, he had some kind of fiction going on, but he confessed to the crime. He alone served time. Now, there were only a few people in the world that James Earl Ray really did anything with, and that was his family. John Ray had visited him the day before James Earl Ray escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary, and the two of them were in league on a number of crimes after James Earl Ray had escaped. He continued to be in touch with his brother and his sister and his other brother, Jerry Ray, while he was a fugitive from justice. And the FBI did know that.
Is it also true that the Martin Luther King family believes that James Earl Ray did not act alone? Or there's some connection to the Martin Luther King family thinking the full story hasn't been told?
Well, here's the thing: is the King family does not believe that James Earl Ray did it. They don't believe even that he pulled the trigger. Now, the level of mistrust in the government by so many in the African American community, especially over King. I mean, King was targeted by the FBI in a way that no other person in the history of this nation that we know of has ever been targeted. And so it is not surprising that they do not believe whatever the story was that James Earl Ray made up, or whether or not he was a patsy for anybody. But Dexter King went to Brushy Mountain Prison, shook James Earl Ray's hand, and said, "We don't believe you did it." James Earl Ray committed the crime. There's a whole lot of evidence that implicates him, and he confessed to the murder. So if the issue isn't who did it, the question is who was involved. And who was involved was much greater than just James Earl Ray. His family was involved. Many of the people who lived in and around the Grapevine Tavern were involved. Russell Byers, maybe he was involved, but maybe not. But certainly there was a lot more going on in the right-wing criminal underworld in St. Louis that was involved in the assassination of King than we have ever known.
Nina Gilden Seavey, what's been the reaction you've gotten since this article was published on Slate? What was it, a week or so ago?
Yeah, it was about a week ago. Well, first of all, it was like I said to my editor, it was like as if I took a bat and hit the like a pinata. The crazy conspiracy theorists just came flooding out of everywhere. But good press like your own have really been interested in this story. It is rare that you find out on the deathbed of an individual that they lied before a major congressional committee. And, and he's, at that now, and then he, I interviewed him and taped him in August, and in October he died. I wrote the article very soon after the time that he died. The people at Slate were very cautious, obviously, about fact checking, every single aspect of what I had done. So it took us a little bit of time to get the piece out because we wanted to make sure it was 100% accurate. And as we just discussed, there's a lot more of these connections if you read the article than we can go through even in a radio show where you've really given me some great time. I appreciate it.
You are a documentary filmmaker, as we've said. Mm-hmm. Is there a documentary to be made out of this? And are you working on one? You know people. Clearly, this would be a heck of a documentary.
Well, it's part of a project that I've been doing and that I'm continuing to do on a series actually called The Plot to Kill a King. And we've got a really good team of people who are involved. And, but we've actually, oddly enough, had some troubles getting the streamers involved because they think, oh, people aren't going to be interested in this story anymore. Well, you know what I found out? That is not true. And so we're going back to, the Netflixes and the Amazons because we have a great team of people who are already working on this project and have been for a couple of years. So watch out for The Plot to Kill a King.
Yeah, I would think so. Let's talk about the FBI files. You said they released some of them, right? Trump wants to release all the Kennedy files. We're all following the Epstein files. Have they not released the Martin Luther King files? Are there more files to be had with the Martin Luther King files?
There was only 230,000 pages. There's probably tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of pages more, and none of the HISCA files have been released. So there is all of the closed session, and Russell Byers testified in both closed session and open session. He testified, James Earl Ray testified in closed session and in open session. Jerry Ray, who was a real talker, he was another one of the brothers. He testified in closed session without an attorney for 2 solid days. So all of that material has yet to be released. So we're waiting with bated breath. And at the end of the article, you read, the time has come. We have got to get this out. And, the King family deserves to know what happened, and America deserves to know what happened.
All right, Nina Gilden Seavey. I used to be a conspiracy theorist, and then everybody jumped on the bandwagon. Now the internet's made me not. I've gone the opposite way, right? I don't believe anything. Wouldn't it be too many people? If this really were true, wouldn't too many people have known this story? Wouldn't somebody have talked somewhere down the line? I mean, we're talking 50 years ago this happened. Wouldn't somebody other than Russell Byers on his deathbed have said anything about this?
I don't think so. And listen, the James Earl Ray, and this was the operating principle of HISCA to begin with, and Robert Blakey, was that the only people that James Earl Ray was not willing to give up were his family. He was the eldest of 9 children. They came up in the most abject of poverty, and they were very, very close. So John Ray, Carol Ray, Jerry Ray, the entire Ray family was involved in this. And the only people that James Earl would never have ratted out were his family. So honestly, I think that the only people who would have talked would have certainly have been the Ray family, which they were not going to do. John Sutherland died. John Kaufman died. Most of the people who were involved in this, the only one who was still alive was Russell Byers until this past October.
Nina Gilden Seavey, how James O'Reilly escaped from the penitentiary. Wasn't there a false bottom in a laundry basket, and he sort of went out with the laundry?
No. It was crazier than that. He escaped in a bread box. Literally in a box of bread. He had some accomplices on the inside help him out, and he got into a box that was filled with that bread that was going out to a work farm with people from the Missouri State Penitentiary. They put loaves of bread on top of him. The truck slowed down, and he hopped out. And he was on the lam for, he got out, he left, he escaped in the fall of 1967 and didn't kill King until the spring of 1968. He went to Montreal, he went to Mexico, he got a nose job, he became a bartender, he became a pornographer, he went into therapy, he worked for the George Wallace campaign. He had quite a life on the lam, which is a great story into itself.
Nina, tell the streamers that you've got yourself one heck of a story, and normally they can see the future. In this instance, they really need to take a second look at this one. Nina Gilden Seavey, will you come back if this ever becomes a movie or a documentary? We'd love to talk more about it.
I'm yours. All
you got
the
it.
way.
Nina Gilden Seavey. The article is in Slate magazine. The article's title is "The Man Who Was Supposed to Kill Martin Luther King Jr." Nina, best of luck. Thanks for checking in.
Thanks, McGraw. You take care now.
You got it. What an unbelievable story. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Back in a moment.
Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, we got a viral moment you guys should check out. It's a great, great video. It's all over the internet, and it involves Taylor University. Taylor University in Upland, Indiana. Since 1980, it's an NAIA school, and since 1980, since they started this tradition, and the tradition is called Silent Night, and they pick a basketball game during the holiday season, and the fans dress up in all sorts of costumes. They dress up as Fred Flintstone. They dress up as Roman gladiators, all sorts of concoctions. And then they're silent. The game starts, and they're completely silent until the team scores its 10th point. And as soon as the team scores its 10th point, the crowd erupts, and they rush the field, rush the court. The video has gone viral. It is one of the coolest videos you'll ever see. This is at Taylor University, a Christian school in Upland, Indiana. A great, great viral video of these kids coming together and singing Silent Night together, arm in arm. But this idea of rushing the court after the 10th point was a pretty cool viral video. So if you're looking for something to put you in a good mood, check out Upland, Indiana's Taylor University and their Silent Night tradition that has been going on since 1980. That's going to do it for hour number 2 for us. Stay right there. We got open phones straight ahead, whatever you want to talk about. Lots going on in the news. We can chew on that next hour. This is, let me do this. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One. Back in a moment.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we are back. It is open phones on a Monday night. Thanks for joining us, as always. We take all comers, and we take them in the order, and they come. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2-McGraw, or that number works out to 1-844-262-4729, 1-844-262-4729. Friday night, we brought you the story of how Netflix wanted to buy Warner Brothers, and then Monday morning, you wake up to the news that Paramount is now taking over and wants to buy Warner Brothers, and it's officially on. It's a hostile takeover. And so get the popcorn, because this could be the best movie. This could be the best movie of the fall. Who's got the odds on this? Who's going to be the Oscar winner over this one? I don't know how it's going to work out. Apparently, or I should argue that the best deal will probably win because Warner Brothers shareholders want the best deal and want the most money, and it comes down to the Benjamins. So I suspect, how these things go and how they're counted up and stock and bonds and everything else, and they'll figure it out, all the money people. But we'll have to wait and see how this thing all turns out. One of the interesting things about this is that the Paramount bid has got a whole lot of Saudi Arabia money in it. And I don't know about you, and I think they relaxed some of these rules, but I'm not so sure that we want Saudi Arabia owning our biggest media companies. Does that throw up a little bit of a red flag? I mean, we have China that owns TikTok and people's heads exploded. Do we really want Saudi Arabia and some of the people involved with Saudi Arabia to own some and our one of our biggest, largest TV conglomerates and media conglomerates? I don't know. I know years ago, right, if you were a foreign country, you couldn't own any radio stations. And again, I think they relaxed some of those rules so you could have some money in. But that was a bit of a head scratcher where you've got a Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund as well as some money from Saudi Arabia. And then it's all going to be convoluted because Jared Kushner's involved, who is the president's son-in-law. That's going to be cause for a bit of a consternation. So you got that story going on. And then anybody see 60 Minutes from last night? In a million years, did you ever think in 1 week Marjorie Taylor Greene would be called a traitor in the same week that President Trump would put his arm around Mondami in the Oval Office? Right? What a bizarre story that was. But last night on 60 Minutes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I guess the breakup is officially complete, and there's really no chance of some type of reconciliation. They have split. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump no longer in the same party. She's America first, she says. She says he's MAGA, and there's a difference. So we can talk about that if you want to. What else we got going on? Well, we got a whole bunch of things. But Tony, you've been holding on for a long time. Let me do this. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729, America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. The hour is yours. Open phones. Give me a call. Tell me what you're doing, what you're thinking. Who knows? We can go rogue. We can go off the wall. We can keep it in the news. Whatever you want. Or maybe you heard one of the earlier 2 hours and you have a question or a comment about the last 2 hours. Happy to take your phone calls. But this is the most fun I have every night is going to the phones. Tony in Montreal, you're first up on America at Night.
Well, how are you? And good evening. And thanks for taking the call. But your earlier caller, the conspiracy theory on the Earl family was that he was on the lam in Montreal. So you must love Montreal because you're letting me back on the air again. And I didn't know about Earl. What's his name? Earl. What's his full name?
James Earl Ray or Russell Byers?
No, James Earl Ray was on the lam in Montreal. That's what I understood. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's what she said. Yeah, when he was. So he escaped from a Missouri penitentiary sometime in the fall, and then he ended up killing James Earl Ray in April. So he spent a number of months all around, especially in Montreal. He said he worked as a bartender. He was ultimately, after he shot him in Memphis, he was picked up in Europe, in London, I believe. So he was able to sort of dodge the authorities for quite a while.
Well, I know, McGraw, you might not be aware of this, but Whitey Bulger spent a lot of time in Montreal, had a lot of friends in Montreal. Montreal was a well-known criminal enclave, very much the New Orleans of the North, and there's a lot of criminality between New York, Boston, and Montreal, with a lot of people that are shady characters that came up here. And even Jefferson Davis spent time in Canada after he was excluded from the United States after the Civil War. So we have a traditional history of enjoying the great patriots leaving your country, and we always welcome them here, even when they're draft dodgers from Vietnam. So we're a happy country. We invite everybody up here. You should all have a fun time. Come to Montreal.
Good to know. Good to know about Montreal. If I ever have to get away and hide out, Montreal's a place to go, I guess.
Well, the St. Louis Blues didn't do us any favors last night. They beat us 4-3. So maybe the people listening from St. Louis are happy. But we've done well with St. Louis. We sent them a lot of people like Mr. Caron, who was working with the Montreal Canadiens assistant general manager. Now he ran your system for quite a long time in St. Louis. I wanted to speak on the December 6, 1917 historical event, which was the explosion in the Halifax Bay, which was a huge event in 1917. It was a French cargo ship, the SS Mont Blanc, which was laden with a lot of war ammunition, etc., and then hit another ship, the SS Emo, that was carrying actually supplies back to Belgium. And they only hit at 1 mile an hour, which is 1.2 knots. But it ended up creating the most devastating explosion, something like 2.9 kilotons of TNT, the equivalent, and it devastated the entire area of Halifax and Richmond, killing 1,782 people and injuring 9,000. It was the greatest and largest event of that nature until Hiroshima.
Why,
World War II.
Tony, why are you bringing this up? What's the connection?
The connection is that the great United States, the great people of the United States of Boston, sent every benevolent Red Cross person to Halifax to assist the Canadian people, so that our countries have history of friendship together. And they came, and the Halifax people were so impressed and so happy with the Boston assistance, is that every year since 1917, we send you a Christmas tree in commemoration that sits in Boston's common, I think it's called Boston Commons. And it is a reminder to generations of the great relationship between our two countries. Our countries, the greatest two friendship countries on the planet. No country is greater than our two countries. No country is closer in trade, in people, and in politics. And I am happy to say that we continue to remember the benevolence of the United States. The great people of the United States are the greatest asset of the United States, and so are the lunch bucket Canadian people, that are the people that are fun-loving and only want to live happily and peacefully and play hockey once in a while.
So you're telling me that since 1917, Canada and Montreal send a Christmas tree to Boston as a thank you of the relief and the services they sent after this tragedy of this explosion in 1917?
It was the government of Nova Scotia and the people of Halifax, not Montreal.
Gotcha.
Okay. So
well, I tell you, that's a great story, Tony. I'm glad you called. I love it, and it goes to my theory or my hypothesis that there are many more things that unite us than divide us. And if we look for the things that unite us, they're plentiful. And if you look for the things that divide us, if you only talk about the things that divide us, you'll only think that we are a divided country or a divided people or divided humans. There are many more things that unite us than divide us.
The message from Canada is Canada loves the American people. Merry Christmas to all of your 6 million followers. And remember, Canada is your greatest ally. No one is greater than the Canadian people, with the backbone that we have and the fighting spirit that is equal to the same fighting spirit in the United States. To live in North America is a joy, and we love to live.
Tony, I will give you the last word. I was rooting for the Blue Jays in the World Series, and I love your national anthem, "O Canada."
You know what? Felix Calix that wrote that, he wrote it in French. It's translated into 2 languages. And the Blue Jays are an amalgamation of Americans, Canadians, and the great player Guerrero is both Canadian and Dominican, and that is why the Blue Jays are popular, because we accept it and we love all people that come and love our country. It's a symbiotic thing. Canadians are peaceful people, and we will never be at odds with the American people. Never.
Tony, thanks for the phone call. As always, have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
That's how you do it. 1-844-2-McGraw. Now that Tony's gone, we have a couple lines open for you. 1-844-2-McGraw. 1-844-2-McGraw. 1-844-262-4729. America at Night only works with phone calls. Give us a call. Back in a moment.
Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Let's open phones. 1-844-2-McGraw. 1-844-262-4729. Boy, they're really picking on Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. First, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene last night on 60 Minutes going after Donald Trump. And she was going after Mike Johnson. You had Elise Stefanik going after Mike Johnson. And now Nancy Mace, Congressman, wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times. She said, listen to this. We get the majority, then become petrified of losing it. We pass most moderate pieces we can pressure conservatives to accept, betraying the coalition that delivered us here. Nancy Pelosi was ruthless, but she got things done. The current House is restrictive and ineffective control with barely any results. Republican leadership seems intent on replicating her model of consolidation without her bold vision to push through policies that won us the majority. So she is she's saying that she doesn't agree with Nancy Pelosi, but she appreciates the power and the way she ran the House of Representatives. Poor Mike Johnson. I like the guy. Now, when I say I like the guy, it's not that I agree with everything he says or I agree with nothing or everything. He has a very nice demeanor. I just think he's a very nice man. When he answers questions, he may disagree with your premise, but I think he's very polite. He's very nice. He's very modest, it seems like. The yin and the yang to him and President Trump, right? But he seems like a very decent man. Now, whether you agree or disagree with anything or everything, he just seems like he tries to answer the question. For the most part, right? I think somebody asked him a question. I think he tries to answer the question. And obviously he puts his own spin on and everything else. I just think I don't know. Ever since he burst onto the scene a year or so ago, I like the guy. I don't know. He just seems very, very nice. Just seems like a very nice man. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2-McGraw. So you've got Nancy Mace going after him. You've got Elise Stefanik going after him. And in this op-ed piece in the New York Times, she says, here's a hard truth Republicans don't want to hear. Nancy Pelosi was a more effective House Speaker than any Republican this century. She goes on to say, I agree with her on essentially nothing. But she understood something we don't. No majority is permanent. When Democrats hold the majority, they ram through the most progressive policies they can. They deliver for their coalition that elected them while they are in power. Republicans do the opposite. We get the majority, then become petrified of losing it. Interesting. Seems like the Republican Party is a bit fraying on the edges, right? You got Rand Paul going after the Secretary of Defense. You got some other Republicans calling out Trump for this boat thing in the Caribbean. So I think the sharks are circling. I think they're starting to realize that President Trump is going to be a lame duck, if not already. I think they're starting to believe some of the polls. I think, right, as all great movements and all great presidents realize, you're only as powerful as long as the clock doesn't run out. And I think Joe Biden suffered from that too, right? Joe Biden, remember, delayed announcing he was going to run for re-election for as long as possible for all sorts of reasons. But they were afraid that he was going to be a lame duck, right? Ultimately, he decided to run for re-election, which was a terrible idea, but one that ultimately led to President Trump being back into office. So I guess for Republicans, it was a great idea. But for the Democrats, terrible idea. But there was nobody that could really tell him no. So that lame duck status sort of starts to creep up. And with President Trump's second term, it starts to see that some Republicans are starting to sort of cut and run and sort of test the waters. However, let me also say this, that the Mitch McConnells of the world, right, the Tom Tillises of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, they're the most vocal, but they're the ones who aren't facing the electorate. The ones that still want to stay in office are still very much towing the line with President Trump. So when you start to see those that are running for re-election criticize President Trump publicly, then I think you got something. Until then, I think his coalition is pretty much with him. Open phones. It only works if you call 1-844-2-McGraw. We'll go to phones on the other side of the break. 1-844-2-McGraw or 1-844-262-4729. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me where you're going. Tell me what you're thinking. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Back in a moment.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, got a little breaking news tonight. We're talking about late night Johnny Carson earlier in the show. It was announced tonight by Disney's ABC that Jimmy Kimmel has extended his contract through 2027. He's had an interesting year after he was taken off the air for a couple of days. And the contract extension, his contract ran out in May of 2026. However, he's extended it one more year to at least 2027. And the reports are saying that it was in the works. It had already been done deal. It was already signed, sealed, and delivered. But they held the news out of respect for Stephen Colbert, whose show has been canceled. And that's going to end in May of 2026. I find that interesting. I also find that he only signed a one-year extension. That's interesting, too. I wonder if that's whose decision that was, if that was his or if that was theirs or mutual, or does he sign one-year contract extensions anyway? I'm not looking to cause trouble, but that's interesting that was only a year. I will say this about Stephen Colbert. I'll not be shocked if they reverse that decision. I've never seen a story where somebody gets fired and then say, oh, please work with us. Please work for the next 18 months. So I wouldn't be shocked if that Stephen Colbert story somehow gets changed around, and I'm still not convinced that show is going to go away because it is such a platform and such a hole for CBS in terms of late night, in terms of early morning, in terms of everything else. I find that just really hard to believe that they're just going to do away with late night altogether, but we'll wait and see what happens. Gil in San Antonio, it's America at Night, open phones. Thanks for calling.
Yes, McGraw. I listened with great interest in the lady who spoke about the conspiracy to kill Martin Luther King.
Yes.
And she comes from George Washington University.
Yes.
And did you know that the Jim Bohannon and Larry King archives, all of their programs from 1970 to 2000 are there in the at the university, George Washington University in Washington.
I did not know that.
Do you want the backstory of how that happened?
I do want the backstory on that. Can you do me a favor first? Can you turn down your radio or your TV or that news or that noise in the background so we can hear you? Is that a radio or TV or something behind you?
I'm very deaf and I have to use the speakerphone. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell me the story.
Well, I think I mentioned to you that I had been a guest on Jim Bohannon's show 3 times.
Yes.
And I tried to get the tapes of that. There was a recording company in Springfield, Virginia called Lion Recording, and they had the contract to record all of that stuff analog. And then if someone wanted a program, you send them some money and they would send you a copy of the program you're interested in.
Okay.
Well, they had gone out of business, but the business was still there. So I was in the Northeast at that time, and I went to Springfield and spoke with the sons of Mr. Lyon. They were closing the business down, and they had all of these tapes, and they were going to take them to a landfill. And you and I were both history majors, I think.
Right.
You said you were okay. You're a Cornhusker. I'm a Blue Jay, as it turns out.
Oh, you went to Creighton. Okay.
Yeah, okay. But so I, as a history major, I said, these are interviews with almost everybody in public life from 1970 to 2000.
Yeah.
This is a treasure trove for historians. Larry King's got a lot of money. He's always looking for a tax deduction. Let's get in touch with Larry King. Larry King donated it to George Washington University because they were the ones who detected his heart problem. You know, he had a heart bypass.
Yes, I do. Yes, I know. Yes.
And it was the hospital at George Washington University, because he was in D.C. at the time, detected that heart problem and led to his bypass and gave him some more years with us. But that's the backstory, and they're still cataloging that stuff. There are thousands and thousands of tapes.
I would imagine.
That's almost went to a landfill.
What a great story. I had no idea. So I got to do a little research and find out how to get a hold of some of those tapes, because I'd love to go back and listen to some of those Larry King tapes. I know some people, as I was getting this job, Westwood One, I don't know if they told me they have the full catalog or they have a number. I think people just along the way said, I still have tapes that they recorded or kept or whatever. But that's it. We'll talk about a treasure trove. You're right. I mean, think of all the people, the two of them interviewed. It's a phenomenal history. You don't want that lost. You want that cataloged so that even now, if you want to go back and see what, Robert Bork said to Larry King in, 1985 or, whoever. I mean, imagine all the great stories they have on that. That is a treasure trove full of stories. Good stuff.
Excuse me. We historians we're always looking for a new footnote that no one has ever used before in our historical research. That's what historians do.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. Gil, great story. Thanks for checking in. Have yourself a good night.
You too. Good night.
You got
Bye-bye.
It's he brings up Larry King and his heart attack. That's right before the heart attack is when I started listening to Larry King. I have to go back and do a little research, but I remember the story Larry King told because he quit smoking. Right, he has a heart attack and he quit smoking the next day. He was a ferocious smoker, and he tells the story on the radio that he gets right. He has the heart attack. He has the bypass. The doctors tell him you have to quit smoking. He quits smoking like that. Just cold turkey, no problems, quits. And he tells the story on the radio that he was such a ferocious smoker that he would smoke in the shower. And I'm listening to this, and he tells the story. I'm like, how do you smoke in the shower? And in the shower, on the outside of the curtain, he had a soap dish. And on the soap dish, he had an ashtray. And he would stick his head, while taking a shower, he would stick his head out of the curtain and with his dry off his hand and take the cigarette that was lit in the ashtray outside of the shower on the soap dish, take a puff, put it back in the ashtray, blow out the smoke, and continue taking a shower. Now, that man was addicted to smoking. And the day he has his heart attack, that's the last cigarette the man ever had. Took him a heart attack to quit smoking, but the man was smoking in the shower. That man loved his cigarettes. All right, it's Open Phones, America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, 1-844-2-McGraw. What a great story. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-7429. It's Open Phones. It only works if you call. Give us a call. Feel free to chime in on a story, on a comment, something you're thinking of, or just kick back, relax, and listen to me tell stories all night long. That works too. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
I have been promised they are working on a text line. Hopefully we'll get the text line up here as soon as possible. I love the text line. I also love phone calls, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. I welcome your phone calls. We are going to keep this last hour open for phone calls. We'll take all comers. We'll take them as they come. We love phone calls, so I want to keep that open, and I just want to keep encouraging you because I love the phone calls, and that's half the fun of doing the show is phone calls. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. There was an article in the New York Times which was fascinating reading, and if you think President Biden made a mistake in the immigration policy, you would be correct. It is a scathing article in the New York Times. I guess it was today or yesterday, in which it goes into quite a bit of detail into how Joe Biden ignored the warnings of his closest advisors, telling him immigration is going to be a campaign issue, and you better wrap your head around it, and you better start doing something about it. And the Biden administration did absolutely nothing. Here's how the story goes. They knew that there was going to be a crisis. They knew that there were going to be new arrivals that overwhelmed the border and the border stations and the border towns and ICE. And they also knew that eventually these people, these undocumented workers, after they flooded the border and flooded the border towns, they were eventually going to move into major cities like New York, like Denver. This was all spelled out for President Biden. The New York Times examined Mr. Biden's record and found that his closest advisors repeatedly told him, hey, you've got a border crisis coming, and this is going to be an issue, and President Trump is going to take this issue and use it against you. And two mistakes the Biden administration made, according to this story. One, that they underestimated the scale of the migration that was coming. So they didn't think the people who were coming were going to come in the numbers in which they came. Mistake number one. Secondly, they failed to appreciate the reaction to the migration. Now, listen to this. This is interesting. They thought in the Biden administration that if they this is unbelievable. And if you're a Democrat or you're a Biden supporter, you might want to sit down for this because you're going to pull your hair out. Okay, one, they didn't think as many people were going to come. And then when they did see the people come, they didn't think it would garner the reaction that it garnered. And here's why they didn't act faster. They were worried and believed that if they cracked down on undocumented workers coming into the country and had a stronger enforcement and tightened up the borders, the Biden administration believed that Latinos would move against them. And they were afraid that the Latino vote would backlash at the Biden administration for cracking down on fellow Latinos. They also believed that progressive voters would hold the Biden administration accountable for tightening up the borders. Well, those calculations were about as wrong as you could be, because not only did the Latino population not support Biden, but they were upset that he didn't do more to mitigate the undocumented workers coming into the country. The Latinos, who, even though Kamala Harris won, but she won by a much, much smaller margin than Biden won 4 years earlier, the Latinos cited the number one reason for supporting Trump in 2024 was because of his crackdown on undocumented workers. So the Biden administration knew it, and they purposely chose not to do anything about it because they were afraid they were going to have backlash from the Latinos that never came home and voted for Biden. Fascinating story. Let's go to the phones here. I believe, if I serve me right, we've got somebody on the phone. Who's on the phone? Did I hear we got a phone call? Gary. Gary, welcome to America at Night. You'll be our last phone call. Take it away. You got the floor.
So I listened to you the other night talking about the issue with the drug addiction from Venezuela, and it seemed like you were leaning towards Pete Hegseth and his general being incorrect, you know, the way you phrase your statements. Now the facts have come out, and it shows that they were right. You know, it shows that they had a JAG lawyer right there advising him on what was going on, what to do, what not to do. And I just think it needs to be cleared up because, you know, Biden did nothing. They allowed everybody to come to the country, do anything they wanted to do, and nobody did anything. I don't hear any Democrats calling in talking about the issues, about what happened, about how degrading it is to our country. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, I live in America, I love America, this is my country. And if I don't agree with the Democrat, I don't agree with him. I don't hate the Democrat. I disagree with the Democrat on policy and the structure of the nation. And I think that it makes more sense that we think that way. We have to live in this country together. But Trump is doing a very good job. He's not a perfect guy, not doing a perfect job. No one will. Biden did a horrific job. And all the people around Biden steered him that way. He was never effective at anything but being a loser. He has never proven anything right. I'm a black man, and I remember all of the racist talk that Biden did and everything the Democrats did. That's all they talk about is race. They don't talk about the red-blooded Americans that make this country work. It's white people, it's black people, it's all kind of people in this country that has to make it work. If you want to come to the country, you got to follow the law.
I'm short on time. Gary, are you done? I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm short on time. Gary,
okay.
Gary, where are you calling in from?
Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, Birmingham, Alabama, thanks for checking in, Gary. Have yourself a good night.
Okay.
All right, good. Fired up, Gary was. Hey, a couple thanks to Nina Gilden Seavey, who wrote that article in Slate magazine about the conspiracy that there are others involved with the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination, and our guest who wrote the book Love Johnny Carson. It was a story about Johnny Carson. Great conversation with both of those authors tonight. And, of course, special thanks to you guys for helping me out as we get through the first couple weeks here of the transition. It is a whole lot of fun, I'm not going to lie. I'll also say this, that Gary, I don't really remember what I said Friday night. It was like 3 or 4 nights ago. I don't even know what I had for breakfast this morning, so I don't really remember what I said on Friday night or last week. Hey, that's going to do it for us on a Monday night. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Thanks for joining us. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.